Helena felt the biting chill of the autumn night seep through the thin car window, settling deep in her bones. The worn fabric of the driver's seat offered little comfort, its springs long ago flattened into an unforgiving hardness. Her hands, once nimble and quick over her cherished sewing machine, now clutched the steering wheel, knuckles white, not from driving, but from the desperate grip on a life that had utterly unraveled. Beside her, Sophia, 10 years old, shivered softly in her sleep, her small breath fogging the glass, while 7-year-old Lucas whimpered faintly from the back seat, undoubtedly dreaming of the warm bed they no longer had. The last $27.15, tucked deep inside her worn wallet, felt like a cruel joke, a meager offering against the gaping maw of their immediate future. Another hungry morning, another day without a roof. Every cough, every rustle from her children pierced her, a sharp reminder of her failure. The image of the crumpled eviction notice, still tucked in her purse, seared behind her eyelids. "You have until Friday," the landlord's voice, devoid of empathy, echoed in her memory, colder than the metal frame of the car. Her husband, Eduardo, his memory a fresh, raw wound, had fought until his last breath, his medical bills devouring every penny they had saved, every hope for a modest future. Helena could still smell the antiseptic of the hospital, hear the rhythmic beeps of the machines that ultimately failed to save him. Now, only the stale scent of recycled car air and the faint, sweet smell of her children's hair remained. The hollow ache in her stomach wasn't just hunger, it was the gnawing emptiness of profound loss, a suffocating despair that promised to swallow her whole. A sharp cramp twisted in Helena's abdomen, a familiar protest from a body fueled by little more than stale bread and weak tea for days. She longed for the simple luxury of a hot bath, the feel of clean sheets, the soft hum of her sewing machine. Instead, her muscles screamed from the contorted sleep, her neck stiff, her back a map of aches. Lucas coughed again, a dry, rattling sound that sent a jolt of panic through her. What if he got sick? How would she afford medicine? Her gaze fell on Sophia's worn teddy bear, clutched tightly in her daughter's arms. It was a tangible link to a home that was no more, a stark symbol of everything they had lost. The silence of the sleeping city outside was punctuated only by the occasional distant siren, a melancholic soundtrack to their utter destitution. The gnawing hunger was a constant companion, a dull throb that made her head light and her vision blur at the edges. She imagined the meager packet of instant noodles she had hidden in the glove compartment, their dinner for tomorrow, if she could find somewhere safe to boil water. The thought of her children waking up to the same empty promise, their tiny stomachs rumbling, was a torment worse than any physical pain. Her fingers traced the faint outline of a scar on her wrist, a memory of a needle prick from happier, busier days. Now, her hands were idle, her craft useless without materials, without a place to work. Every passing car felt like a judgment, every flickering street lamp a spotlight on her abject failure to provide for her children. They deserved so much more than this suffocating despair. Helena squeezed her eyes shut, a silent plea escaping her lips into the cold, dark air of the car. She was 43, a widow, a mother of 2, and utterly adrift, with no family to turn to, no friend to offer a helping hand. The world felt like a vast, indifferent ocean, and she, with her 2 precious children, was a tiny, broken boat, tossed about by merciless waves. The weight of her helplessness was crushing, a heavy cloak woven from grief and poverty. How much more could she endure before she broke? What would you do if you found yourself trapped in such a desperate corner, with the fate of your children resting solely on your exhausted shoulders? Perhaps a flicker of hope might yet appear, but for now the darkness consumed her. If you're moved by Helena's struggle, please consider subscribing to our channel and sharing this story, so more people can join us on this journey of mystery and overcoming. The sun, a pale, indifferent disk, barely pierced the early morning fog as Helena's eyes, heavy with sleeplessness, scoured the smudged classifieds of a forgotten newspaper in a grimy diner. The acrid scent of stale coffee and cheap disinfectant clung to the air, making her stomach clench with an unpleasant mix of nausea and hunger. There, nestled between an advertisement for used tires and a lost dog notice, a tiny, almost invisible entry, printed in faded ink, caught her attention. Housekeeper required, rural farm, accommodation and small wage provided, immediate start, inquire at Serra Negra. Serra Negra. The words resonated in her mind like a distant echo, a forgotten melody. A tiny, fragile tendril of hope, delicate as a newborn fern, unfurled within the barren landscape of her heart. Housing, a roof over her children's heads. It was a faint whisper against the roar of her desperation, but it was a sound, a possibility, something to cling to in the vast, suffocating silence of her despair. Her fingers, stiff and cold, trembled as they traced the lines, a silent prayer forming on her lips. A surge of adrenaline, cold and sharp, cut through the bone-deep weariness that had become her constant companion. This wasn't a choice, it was a desperate gamble, a last throw of the dice in a game she was already losing. The image of Sophia's trusting face and Lucas's small, vulnerable body flashed before her eyes, pushing away the gnawing fear of the unknown. She felt the heavy weight of their dependence, a burden that was also her greatest strength. This farm, this vague promise of Serra Negra, was their only port in a relentless storm. Helena swallowed hard, tasting the metallic tang of anxiety. The thought of uprooting them again, of venturing into a complete unknown, was terrifying. Yet the alternative, another night in the cramped, cold car, another day of scrounging for scraps, was far more unbearable. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs, a primal instinct for survival overriding all caution. With a resolve born of pure maternal desperation, Helena dialed the number listed, her hand shaking so much she almost dropped the grimy payphone receiver. The crackle of static on the line only amplified her apprehension, each moment stretching into an eternity before a gruff, disembodied voice answered. The details were sparse, almost eerily so. The farm was isolated, very old, and needed a firm hand. No questions asked about her past, no references requested, just a hurried confirmation that the position was hers if she could arrive within the week. The lack of scrutiny, usually a red flag, now felt like a blessing, a door opening where every other had slammed shut. It was too good to be true, perhaps, but at this point, any chance, no matter how slim or suspicious, was a chance she had to take. A bitter taste of irony filled her mouth. The desperation that had stripped her of everything now offered a distorted semblance of salvation. The meager belongings they possessed fit snugly, almost mockingly, into the trunk of the old, dented sedan. A threadbare suitcase containing their few clothes, a small box of Lucas's worn-out toys, Sophia's cherished teddy bear, and a small, carefully wrapped package holding Helena's grandmother's thimble and a single, dull sewing needle, the last remnants of her craft and her identity. Her heart ached with the emptiness of what they left behind, the echoes of a life now irrevocably lost. The children, sensing the gravity of the moment, were unusually quiet, their small faces pressed against the car windows, watching the familiar dreary cityscape slowly recede into the rearview mirror. Sophia clutched her bear, her lower lip trembling slightly, while Lucas, ever the more stoic, simply gazed ahead, his brow furrowed in a miniature expression of worry. Helena felt a pang of guilt, wondering if she was dragging them from one misery to another. The journey began with a false sense of adventure for the children, their initial excitement quickly fading into the monotonous drone of the engine and the endless stretch of unfamiliar highway. Helena drove, her gaze fixed on the road ahead, her hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. Every mile devoured by the car felt like another severing from the life they once knew, another step into the vast, echoing unknown. The city sounds slowly gave way to the hum of tires on asphalt, then to the crunch of gravel as they turned onto increasingly remote roads. The landscape shifted from urban sprawl to sparse suburbs, then to endless fields and dense patches of woods, each tree a silent sentinel watching their progress. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint, earthy scent of damp soil and unseen foliage, a stark contrast to the city's concrete and exhaust. As the hours bled into days, the fatigue became a heavy cloak, wrapping around Helena's shoulders, pressing down on her spirit. They stopped at nondescript roadside motels, their beds lumpy, their linens smelling faintly of bleach and stale air. Each meal was a careful calculation, stretching their rapidly dwindling funds to cover another day, another tank of gas. The children, usually so vibrant, grew subdued, their questions about their destination becoming more frequent, laced with an undercurrent of anxiety. "Are we there yet, Mamma?" Sophia would ask, her voice small and uncertain. "Is the farm big?" Lucas would inquire, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. Helena offered reassurances she barely felt, her own heart a tight knot of apprehension. The isolation deepened with every mile, the promise of a safe haven feeling increasingly distant, almost like a mirage. The final stretch of road was not even a road, but a winding, deeply rutted dirt track, barely wide enough for the car. The wheels churned, spitting up dust and small stones, the old suspension groaning in protest. Tree branches, thick and gnarled, scraped against the car's paintwork, a symphony of minor violence. The silence of the remote countryside was profound, broken only by the chirping of unseen insects and the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. Elena's hands ached from the effort of wrestling the steering wheel, her shoulders stiff with tension. The air, thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves, seemed to press in on them, claustrophobic and ancient. A shiver, not entirely from the cooling air, ran down her spine. The farm, wherever it was truly cut off, a place forgotten by the modern world. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and fiery orange, casting long, eerie shadows across the desolate landscape. Helena squinted through the deepening twilight, her heart thumping irregularly against her ribs. The GPS signal had long since vanished, replaced by a vague sense of direction and a growing unease. Every turn in the winding track brought only more trees, more shadows, more of the same oppressive silence. She felt an unsettling premonition, a cold dread seeping into her bones. This journey, which had started with a desperate flicker of hope, was slowly transforming into an odyssey of increasing isolation and mounting anxiety. The children, lulled by the constant motion and the darkening sky, had finally fallen asleep in the back, their soft, even breaths the only sound of comfort in the rapidly approaching darkness. Then, through a sudden clearing in the ancient, twisted trees, it appeared, not the welcoming beacon of a distant light, but a silhouette, dark and imposing against the fading twilight. Serra Negra. The name, once a symbol of fragile hope, now loomed like a spectre. The farm was less a haven and more a ruin, its dilapidated structures barely visible through the overgrown weeds and tangled vines that clung to everything like a parasitic shroud. Helena slowed the car, her foot hovering over the brake, a lump forming in her throat. The air here was heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth, decaying wood, and something else, a faint, musty odor that spoke of long abandonment and lingering secrets. A cold, hard knot tightened in her stomach. This was not what she had imagined, not even in her most pessimistic moments. The main house, a grand structure in its past, now stood as a skeletal monument to neglect. Gaping holes marred the roof, like empty eyes staring out at the wilderness. Windows were either shattered or boarded up, their broken panes reflecting the last vestiges of daylight with a dull, mournful gleam. The paint had long ago peeled away, leaving patches of raw, exposed wood, weathered and grey like old bones. A wooden porch, once inviting, now sagged precariously, its steps swallowed by a riot of overgrown weeds. The sheer scale of the abandonment was overwhelming, a stark visual representation of profound decay. Helena gripped the steering wheel so tightly, her fingers ached, a wave of sickening disappointment washing over her, heavy and cold as a winter tide. This wasn't a fresh start, it was a deeper descent. Helena finally cut the engine, plunging them into an unnerving silence, broken only by the soft chirping of crickets and the distant hoot of an owl. The air hung heavy and still, thick with the scent of damp earth, decaying leaves, and an undeniable mustiness that seemed to emanate from the very walls of the house. She opened the car door, the metallic groan echoing loudly in the oppressive quiet, and stepped out onto the gravel driveway. Her boots crunched against the loose stones, each sound amplified in the vast solitude. A chill wind, carrying the scent of something ancient and forgotten, swept across the yard, rustling through the tall, unkempt grass that reached up to her knees. She felt a profound sense of isolation, a chilling awareness of being utterly alone in a place that time had abandoned. As Helena walked towards the front door, pushing aside a tangle of thorny bushes, a faint, unsettling scratching sound reached her ears. The unmistakable scurrying of rats within the walls, a grim welcome. The heavy wooden door, warped and splintered, creaked open with a groan that seemed to articulate the house's agony. Inside, the air was stagnant, cold, and heavy with the pervasive smell of mold and decay, a pungent mix that made her nose wrinkle and her stomach churn. Dust motes danced in the slivers of weak moonlight filtering through the broken windows, illuminating the rot and ruin within. Furniture, once elegant, now stood as ghostly shapes, draped in white sheets that were themselves stained with mildew and perforated by time, their wooden frames collapsing in on themselves. The true horror unfolded with each step deeper into the house. The roof, as she had suspected from outside, had not just holes but a massive, gaping maw in the ceiling of what appeared to be the main living area, allowing rainwater to stream directly onto the floorboards below, which were now softened and warped with rot. Patches of black, virulent mold bloomed like grotesque flowers on every wall, clinging to the plaster and even to the remaining scraps of wallpaper, a suffocating blanket of decay. There was no electricity, the wires having long since been severed or stolen, leaving only dead outlets and the chilling promise of darkness. Helena felt a lump form in her throat, a cold, hard stone of dread. Every detail screamed neglect, abandonment, a place where life had not only ceased, but had been actively devoured by time and the elements. A quick check of the rusty taps in what was once a kitchen confirmed another chilling reality. The water supply was barely a trickle of rusty, foul-smelling liquid, entirely unfit for drinking or washing. The prospect of no clean water, no electricity, and a roof that offered more exposure than shelter hit Helena with the force of a physical blow. The illusion of a safe haven shattered, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. This place, this so-called accommodation, was worse than the car. It was a tomb, a decaying monument to a forgotten past, and she had dragged her innocent children into its heart. Her heart squeezed painfully in her chest, the despair that she thought she had outrun now rising to meet her, its dark tendrils wrapping around her, suffocating her last breaths of hope. Tears, hot and bitter, finally welled in Helena's eyes, blurring the already dim and desolate surroundings. She choked back a sob, pressing a trembling hand against her mouth to muffle the sound, desperate not to wake the children. The crushing weight of her failure, her immense miscalculation, pressed down on her, threatening to crack her fragile resolve. She had risked everything, endured so much, for this desolate shell, this ghost of a home. The bitter taste of defeat filled her mouth, more potent than the stale air or the scent of mold. She was utterly, irrevocably trapped, deeper in the abyss than ever before. This wasn't a false hope. It was a cruel deception, a monstrous joke played by a relentless fate. She closed her eyes, the darkness of the ruined house mirroring the desolation in her soul. The chilling reality of Serra Negra pressed in on Helena, the mold-laden air, the pervasive stench of decay, the stark evidence of utter ruin. But despair was a luxury she couldn't afford, not with Lucas and Sophia's fragile lives depending on her. Her immediate, primal instinct kicked in. Find a corner, any corner, that offered even a semblance of shelter from the elements and the biting cold that seeped through the shattered windows. Her eyes, still stinging from unshed tears, scanned the cavernous, desolate rooms, searching for a spot where the rain wouldn't immediately soak them, a patch of floor firm enough to lay a blanket. The sense of overwhelming responsibility, heavier than any physical weight, spurred her onward despite the leaden ache in her limbs and the deep, hollow void in her gut. She had to create a sanctuary, however temporary, from this skeletal monument to neglect. Her hands, chapped and rough from countless hours of worry, instinctively began to push aside decaying remnants of furniture, clearing a small area in what seemed to be a study, slightly removed from the worst of the roof collapse. The scraping sound of wood against grimy floorboards echoed hollowly in the vast, empty space, each reverberation emphasizing the profound solitude of the farm. She draped a thick, mildewed tarpaulin, miraculously found in the back of the car, over a broken-down desk and a couple of salvaged chairs, improvising a crude canopy against any lingering drips from the roof. The air, despite her efforts, remained thick with the smell of damp earth and aggressive fungi, a constant, cloying reminder of their precarious existence. Her lungs burned with every breath, and a persistent cough tightened her chest, a physical manifestation of the mental burden she carried. Lucas, ever the curious one, despite his young age and the overwhelming unfamiliarity of their surroundings, had begun to explore the immediate vicinity of their makeshift camp, while Sophia slept fitfully in the car. His small, muffled footsteps barely disturbed the thick layer of dust that coated every surface. Helena, her heart still a tight knot of apprehension, kept one eye on him, a silent sentinel against further disaster. He was trying to be helpful, she knew, his quiet explorations a childish attempt to make sense of the chaos. His small hand traced the outline of a faded bookshelf, then a dusty, disused fireplace, its brickwork blackened with age and neglect. A tiny, almost imperceptible glint, caught by a stray beam of moonlight filtering through a high window, suddenly arrested his attention, pulling him closer to the dark maw of the chimney. Helena watched Lucas, her gaze a constant, vigilant tether. She wished she could offer him the comfort of a normal home, the familiar warmth of a crackling fire in a clean hearth. Instead, the fireplace before them was a gaping, soot-stained hole, a mausoleum of forgotten flames. Lucas, drawn by an innocent curiosity that belied the grim reality surrounding them, knelt down, his small fingers instinctively reaching into the darkness. "Mama," he whispered, his voice hushed and uncertain. "There's something shiny here, like a star." His tone, typically boisterous, was subdued by the oppressive silence of the house, a testament to the unsettling atmosphere that permeated every inch of Serra Negra. A jolt of unease, then a flicker of intrigue, ran through Helena. "Shiny," she murmured, her voice raspy from exhaustion and the pervasive mold. She pushed herself up from the floor, her joints protesting with a dull ache, and moved towards him, her heart quickening its pace. The idea of anything shiny in this desolate ruin felt incongruous, almost fantastical. Her practical mind, honed by years of struggle, immediately sought a logical explanation, perhaps a piece of broken glass, or a discarded shard of metal from the decaying structure. Yet Lucas's earnestness, the way his small hand pointed with such conviction, piqued her interest, cutting through the thick fog of her despair, if only for a moment. Kneeling beside Lucas, Helena peered into the shadowy recess of the disused fireplace. The air inside was still and heavy, smelling of ancient ash and something subtly metallic, distinct from the overarching scent of decay. Her eyes adjusted to the gloom, following the direction of Lucas's outstretched finger. There, nestled deep within a small, almost imperceptible cavity in the blackened brickwork, something indeed reflected the faint moonlight. It wasn't a star, as Lucas had imagined, but a tiny, insistent glimmer, a point of light against the oppressive darkness, beckoning them closer into the cold, silent maw of the hearth. A faint shiver traced its way up her spine. With a cautious sigh, Helena reached her hand into the cold, grimy opening. Her fingers brushed against rough mortar and accumulated dust before closing around a small, surprisingly heavy object. The metallic glint intensified as she pulled it free, bringing it into the faint light. It was an old iron key, intricately designed with ornate swirls and a delicate, almost artistic handle, far too elaborate for a simple lock. Its surface was dark with age, but a meticulous polish remained on its raised patterns, hinting at a forgotten beauty. Next to it, concealed further back in the cavity, lay a small, leather-bound diary, its cover faded and brittle, its edges frayed like ancient parchment. The air around it seemed to hold a breath, a silent testament to its hidden history. The key felt cool and smooth against her fingertips, its weight substantial, suggesting a quality of craftsmanship long past. It was unlike any key she had ever seen, its intricate design speaking of secrets and locked doors, of a time when objects were imbued with more than mere function. The diary, cradled in her other hand, felt fragile, almost delicate, as if a single rough movement might crumble it to dust. Its leather cover, once a rich brown dye, was now a mottled, desaturated hue, with faint, almost imperceptible gold embossing that hinted at its original elegance. A thick layer of dust coated both items, but underneath, their inherent character shone through, defying the passage of time and neglect. Helena's heart thumped a slow, insistent rhythm against her ribs. This wasn't broken glass, nor a discarded piece of trash. This was deliberate, carefully hidden, Her practical mind, usually focused on the mundane struggle for survival, found itself captivated by the sudden shift in reality. A tangible mystery had just presented itself, offering a momentary reprieve from the relentless despair. Lucas, sensing her absorption, leaned in, his small face etched with a mixture of wonder and nascent fear. "What is it, Mama?" he whispered, his voice barely audible, reflecting the hushed reverence that had settled over them in the discovery's wake. The air seemed to thicken, charged with untold stories. Carefully, Helena wiped some of the dust from the diary's cover with her thumb. The leather felt strangely soft, despite its age, yielding slightly under her touch. Her gaze fell upon a date, faintly inscribed near the spine. 1932. 1932. Almost a century ago. The numbers, stark against the faded cover, spoke of a forgotten era, a history buried beneath layers of time and neglect, now suddenly unearthed. A profound sense of curiosity, a rare emotion in her recent life, stirred within her. What secrets did this ancient journal hold? Who wrote it? And why was it hidden with such an elaborate key in this desolate, forgotten place? Each detail was a new question, a freshly laid thread in a deepening labyrinth. The key and the diary, so small yet so potent, felt like pieces of a much larger, unseen puzzle. Helena turned the key over in her palm, its intricate design a silent challenge. It was too grand for a simple lock, too significant to be merely decorative. Its weight seemed to hum with forgotten purpose. Where did it belong? What secret door or chest was it destined to unlock? The question echoed in the vast, silent room, a tantalizing whisper of untold possibilities. She felt a strange pull, a nascent instinct guiding her, suggesting that this was more than just an old relic. It was an invitation, a starting point for a journey she hadn't anticipated, a path leading away from the immediate desolation and into the intriguing shadows of Serra Negra's past. Helena carefully opened the small, brittle diary, her fingers trembling slightly. The pages, yellowed and fragile, crackled faintly as she turned them. The ink, faded to a sepia tone, was in a formal, elegant script, but the language was Portuguese, filled with antiquated terms she struggled to fully grasp. The entries were sparse, often cryptic, referring to the colonel, the Lansborough and the deal, but never explicitly detailing the nature of these events. There were mentions of the hiding place and the safety, tantalizing clues that danced at the edges of her understanding, raising more questions than answers. The words felt heavy with unspoken meaning, imbued with a sense of urgency that transcended the decades. A cold shiver snaked down Helena's spine. The casual mentions of the deal and the Lanses in the diary entries sparked a nascent unease within her, a vague premonition that this ancient history might not be entirely benign. She felt the chill of secrets long buried, of events that had left their mark not only on the decaying pages, but perhaps on the very fabric of the farm itself. The weight of the diary in her hands felt heavier, charged with a strange, almost malevolent energy. Her mind, despite her weariness, raced when connecting the dots of abandonment, the sheer scale of the ruin, with these cryptic entries. Could the house's decay be a reflection of a deeper, more sinister past? The question of the key's purpose gnawed at her, a persistent itch in her mind. This small diary offered hints, but no direct answers. Where was the hiding place? What was the safety it referred to? Helena's eyes swept over the room again, seeing it with new perception, not just as a ruin but as a repository of hidden meaning. Every creak of the old house, every gust of wind rustling through the broken windows seemed to whisper possibilities. The sheer isolation of Serra Negra, once a source of dread, now seemed a perfect canvas for secrets. Her stomach, usually protesting from hunger, now churned with a mixture of excitement and burgeoning anxiety, a strange, potent cocktail of emotions. The next morning, armed with the cryptic clues from the small diary and the heavy iron key, Helena embarked on a deliberate exploration of the farm. The children, though still subdued, found a momentary distraction in the novelty of hunting for treasure, their youthful imaginations sparked by the promise of discovery. Helena, however, was driven by a more complex mix of desperation and burgeoning intrigue. She needed to understand, to unravel this sudden thread of mystery that had woven itself into the grim tapestry of her survival. The key felt warm in her pocket, a constant presence, a silent promise of answers, urging her to continue her painstaking search through the dilapidated structures. Her search led her through the decaying main house, where she examined every nook, every loose floorboard, every obscure corner. The pervasive smell of mold and damp earth was a constant companion, but now it was tinged with the scent of old wood and something vaguely metallic, a scent her heightened senses had never registered before. She moved with a methodical focus, her senses alert, seeking anything that might remotely fit the intricate design of the key. Her fingers traced rough edges, pushed against resistant surfaces, her ears strained for any unusual sound that might hint at a hidden mechanism. The house, once a symbol of her misery, was slowly transforming into a silent accomplice in a silent quest. Eventually, her gaze was drawn to the farm's oldest barn, a sprawling, weathered structure even more decrepit than the main house. Its massive wooden doors, half collapsed, hung precariously on rusty hinges, groaning softly in the morning breeze. The air inside was thick with the distinct smell of aged hay and generations of animal life, mingled with the familiar scent of decay. A strange intuition, a quiet whisper in the back of her mind, guided her steps towards a particular section of the barn, a corner piled high with bales of old, dusty hay almost reaching the rafters. It felt different. The air here was somehow heavier, more stagnant, pregnant with unspoken history. The task of moving the heavy, compacted hay bales was arduous, her muscles screaming in protest with each lift and drag. Dust, thick and irritating, filled the air, making her eyes water and her throat itch. Lucas, despite her protests, insisted on helping, his small hands pulling at the lighter clumps, his youthful energy a surprising source of strength. After what felt like an eternity of dusty labor, pushing aside layers of dry, prickly fodder, they uncovered a section of the barn floor that was distinct from the rest. It wasn't earth, but wood, dark, heavily aged planks, neatly cut to form a square, with a small, rusted iron ring embedded near its center, a trapdoor. Helena's breath hitched in her throat. The trapdoor, almost perfectly camouflaged by years of accumulated hay, was secured by an equally ancient, heavily rusted padlock. Its surface was so corroded that the intricacies of its design were almost entirely obscured by layers of orange-brown rust. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anticipation and trepidation. This had to be it. The key, warm in her palm, seemed to vibrate with a silent urgency. With trembling fingers, she inserted the ornate iron key into the padlock's keyhole. It was a tight fit, the ancient mechanism resisting for a moment. Then, with a slow, deliberate click, it yielded, the sound of the padlock releasing a dull metallic clunk that resonated unnaturally loud in the vast silence of the barn, sent a shiver through Helena. It was the sound of a barrier falling, of a secret finally giving way after decades of steadfast concealment. With another deep breath, she grasped the rusty iron ring and, with a heave that strained every muscle in her back, pulled the trap door open. It moved with a slow, agonizing groan, protesting its long slumber, revealing a dark, yawning abyss below. The air that rushed up from the depths was cool and dry, carrying a faint earthy scent, but notably devoid of the pervasive mold and decay that plagued the rest of the farm. A ladder, surprisingly sturdy despite its age, descended into the blackness. Helena hesitated for a moment, a wave of fear washing over her. What dark unknown lay beneath? What if it was a trap, or worse, a grave? But the scent, that peculiar, dry earthiness, so different from the rest of the ruin, compelled her forward, overriding her apprehension. Lucas, his face a mixture of fear and wide-eyed excitement, clung to her side. "Can we go down, Mama?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She looked at his eager face, then back into the darkness. She couldn't stop now. The mystery had taken hold, pulling her into its depths. Taking a deep, bracing breath, Helena carefully descended the creaking ladder, each rung groaning under her weight, the wooden steps feeling surprisingly firm beneath her worn boots. The darkness was absolute for a few precarious moments, until the faint light from the trapdoor above began to illuminate the space below. It wasn't a damp, muddy cellar, as she had feared. Instead, she found herself in a surprisingly well-preserved, dry underground room, its walls lined with rough-hewn stone, the air remarkably fresh and still. The cool, stable temperature hinted at careful construction, designed to protect its contents from the ravages of time and the elements. The cellar was smaller than she expected, but meticulously organized. Wooden shelves lined one wall, empty now, but bearing the faint impressions of long-gone contents. The floor, made of packed earth, was swept clean, almost polished by time. The absence of mold, of the creeping decay that consumed the rest of the farm, was striking. It felt like a time capsule. A pocket of history perfectly preserved while the world above crumbled. Her eyes, now fully adjusted to the dim light, scanned the room, searching, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm of anticipation. And then she saw it, nestled in the far corner, partially obscured by a thick canvas sheet. Pulling aside the heavy, dust-covered canvas, Helena gasped. There, resting on a small, elevated stone platform, was a dark wooden chest, bound with straps of tarnished brass and iron, its surface gleaming faintly even in the dim light. It was exquisitely crafted, a testament to a forgotten era of skilled artisans. Her hands, calloused and trembling, traced the cold metal of its latches. The small diary had led her here, through layers of decay and hidden passages, to this single, undeniable point of profound discovery. This was the safety. This was the hiding place. The sheer audacity of its concealment, the decades of its silent vigil, left her breathless. With a final, trembling push, Helena forced open the heavy lid of the chest. A soft, golden glow seemed to emanate from within, illuminating the cellar with another worldly radiance. Her eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat, as she stared at the unimaginable piles of glittering gold bars, each one heavy and dense, stacked neatly like forgotten bricks. Interspersed among them were ancient coins, their faces bearing the faint imprints of long-dead emperors and forgotten symbols. Beneath the shimmering gold, carefully bundled and tied with brittle string, lay stacks of old vellum-like documents, their titles proclaiming títulos de propiedad, land deeds, and a larger volume of diaries, thicker and more numerous than the first, their covers promising deeper, darker secrets. The weight of history, of immense wealth and of profound mystery settled upon her. Helena stared, her breath hitched, at the shimmering tableau within the chest. The gold bars, cool and weighty in her calloused hands, were more than mere metal. They were a monument to a past she couldn't yet fathom. Ancient coins, their etched faces whispering forgotten histories, tumbled beneath her touch. But it was the bundles of brittle documents, their titles boldly proclaiming títulos de propiedade, land deeds, and the stack of thick, leather-bound diaries beneath them that truly held her gaze. Her heart, which moments ago had thrummed with the sheer shock of immense wealth, now pounded with a different kind of urgency, a primal knowing that the real treasure lay not in the glittering gold, but in the forgotten words, in the unraveling of Serra Negra's shadowed past. A deep, cold current of unease began to replace the fleeting euphoria as the weight of history settled upon her, heavy and silent. With trembling fingers, Helena carefully lifted the largest of the diaries, its cover thicker and more worn than the small one she'd found in the fireplace. The leather crackled softly, releasing a dry, earthy scent mingled with the unmistakable aroma of aged paper and forgotten ink. She carefully opened it, the pages rustling like dry leaves. Unlike the cryptic entries of the smaller journal, these were meticulous, filled with a sprawling, elegant script that chronicled daily events, financial transactions, and, most disturbingly, detailed accounts of interactions with local authorities and landholders. The formal tone contrasted sharply with the increasingly desperate underlying narrative, sketching a picture of ambition, greed, and a deep-seated ruthlessness that chilled her to the bone. Her eyes, strained from the dim light, raced across the faded lines, each word pulling her deeper into the labyrinth of an ancient conspiracy. The name Coronel Horacio Medeiros appeared frequently, always with an air of self-importance and ruthless efficiency. The entries spoke of acquisitions, negotiations, and the expansion of the Medeiros estate, but the language was coded, hinting at methods far from legal. Phrases like persuasive incentives and necessary clearances began to appear alongside mentions of specific small landowners, their names etched into the yellowed pages, only to be followed by notes of their departure on or relocation. Helena felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. This wasn't just about accumulating wealth. It was about systematically dispossessing people, shattering lives, all under the guise of progress and legal precedent. The sheer audacity of it, written so plainly yet so subtly in the colonel's elegant hand, was sickening. The picture emerging from the faded ink was one of a complex, ruthless plot. Colonel Horacio Medeiros, a man of immense power and cunning in the 1930s, had orchestrated a massive scheme of illegal land appropriation. He colluded with corrupt politicians and judges, using legal loopholes, intimidation, and outright fraud to strip small, invulnerable farmers of their ancestral lands. The diaries detailed meeting after meeting, bribes delivered, threats whispered. Helena could almost hear the rustle of official papers being doctored, the quiet snickering of men dividing up stolen territories. The weight of these revelations pressed down on her, the air in the cellar growing thick with the ghosts of past injustices. Her hands, clenching the aged paper, felt as though they held the very sorrow of generations. The gold bars and ancient coins in the chest, once a symbol of immense, unexpected fortune, now seemed to gleam with a sinister light. Colonel Medeiros's entries clarified their dark purpose. They were not just personal wealth but a meticulously managed slush fund. This was the payment for his corrupt political allies, the persuasive incentives to silence dissent, and the bribes to legalize the stolen land deeds. The treasure was the lifeblood of his criminal enterprise, a chilling testament to how systematic greed could thrive under the veneer of legality. Helena felt a profound disgust rise in her throat. The sheer coldness of it all, the methodical cruelty encoded in these brittle pages, was a far more potent and terrifying discovery than any amount of glittering metal. The diaries then took a dramatic turn, revealing the colonel's ultimate downfall, a betrayal by his own trusted partner, a man identified only as Dr. Almeida. The entries grew more frantic, less formal, expressing rage and paranoia. Almeida, it seemed, had not only been complicit in the land grabs, but had also meticulously kept copies of the original Tsiwan's authentic land documents, proving the fraud. He had fled, threatening to expose Medeiros and his entire network if the colonel ever moved against him. The gold, meant to solidify the illicit empire, was suddenly a liability, a secret that could destroy him. This betrayal, coming from within, had forced the colonel to hastily hide everything, the gold, the true deeds, and these damning diaries, in this very cellar. Helena's head reeled. The magnitude of the injustice, the calculated cruelty, and the subsequent betrayal painted a vivid, horrifying picture of Serra Negra's origins. Her stomach churned, a mixture of nausea and righteous anger rising within her. She felt a profound connection to the nameless, voiceless farmers whose lives had been uprooted, their legacies stolen, their land absorbed into this sprawling, cursed estate. The faint, musty smell of the old paper was now overlaid with the phantom scent of injustice, a lingering stain on the very foundation of the farm. Every fiber of her being resonated with their silent cry for justice, recognizing in their plight a stark, albeit historical, parallel to her own current vulnerability and desperation. The implications of her discovery were staggering. These weren't just dusty historical records. They were a living, breathing testament to a monumental crime, a weapon against generations of inherited illegality. The old land deeds, tucked beneath the gold, were proof that the current ownership of Serra Negra and possibly vast tracts of surrounding land was built on fraud. The diaries provided the narrative, the who, what, and why, giving context and undeniable evidence. Helena realized, with a jolt that sent a tremor through her weary body, that she held in her hands the power to expose a truth that had been buried for nearly a century, a truth that could shake the very foundations of power in the region. Suddenly, a distant sound, cutting through the heavy silence of the cellar, shattered her absorption. The low, insistent hum of an approaching vehicle, growing steadily louder, then the unmistakable crunch of tires on the gravel driveway outside. It was a sound entirely out of place in this forgotten corner of the world, a jarring intrusion that sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through her veins. Her heart leaped into her throat, a cold dread seizing her. Who could possibly be coming to this desolate ruin, and at this exact moment, just as she uncovered its darkest secrets? The sound was too precise, too deliberate, for a casual passerby. Helena quickly closed the chest, throwing the canvas back over it, her hands clumsy with panic. She scrambled up the ladder, pulling the trapdoor shut, the metal clanging softly as she replaced the rusty padlock. As she emerged from the barn, the sunlight, now high in the sky, seemed to mock her hurried movements. A sleek, black SUV, far too modern and polished for the dirt road, sat silently in front of the main house. A tall, impeccably dressed man in a crisp white shirt and tailored trousers stood beside it, his posture radiating an almost predatory confidence. His dark eyes, surveying the dilapidated farm, seemed to catch the faint glint of her hurried exit from the barn. He turned, a practiced, almost too friendly smile gracing his lips. "Good morning," he called out, his voice smooth and authoritative, yet with an unsettling undertone of manufactured pleasantry. "You must be Helena? Dr. Ricardo Almeida? I'm the administrator of Serra Negra Farm, or, I should say, the designated steward of the family's assets." He extended a hand, his grip firm and cool, a stark contrast to her own calloused skin. Helena felt an immediate, visceral sense of unease. His eyes, though seemingly polite, held a depth of calculation, a knowing glint that suggested he saw far more than just a disheveled housekeeper. This was the grandson, the heir to the fraud. "I understand you've just arrived," Ricardo continued, his gaze sweeping over the ruined house, then lingering on Helena with a disquieting intensity. "A desperate situation, I gather. The old place isn't quite what one might expect from an accommodation, is it?" He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Look, I'm a pragmatic man. This farm is complicated. It holds little value to me in its current state. I'm prepared to offer you a sum, a generous sum, considering the circumstances, enough to help you find a proper home, a safer environment for your children. Let's say 10,000 reis, for you to simply pack up your things and leave. Today." The offer, though seemingly substantial, felt like a pittance compared to the weight of the gold and the secrets she'd just uncovered. But Ricardo's smile began to falter, a steely glint entering his eyes. "You see, Helena, this farm is very isolated, very old, and sometimes, in places like these, accidents happen, things break, fires can start, especially when there are curious children exploring hidden corners. This isn't a safe place for a family. No matter how desperate, it's a place best left forgotten, for everyone's sake." The unspoken threat hung heavy in the air, a poisonous vapor twisting her gut. Helena felt her blood run cold. His words, delivered with such calm precision, were a thinly veiled warning, a chilling reminder of her children's vulnerability. He knew, or at least suspected, she had found something. The gold, the diaries, the truth. It all suddenly felt less like a potential salvation and more like a deadly burden. Her mind raced, a terrifying whirlwind of fear and defiance. Should she flee, accept his paltry sum, and protect her children from this tangible threat? Or should she stand her ground, armed with the century-old secrets, and fight for a justice that seemed impossibly distant? The eyes of her children, innocent and trusting, flashed before her. Her breath hitched, a silent scream trapped in her chest. She had nothing, yet now she held something immensely valuable and incredibly dangerous. Dr. Ricardo Almeida, sleek and menacing, stood before her, his veiled threat a cold promise. He represented generations of injustice, and now he was a direct threat to her children's lives. The choice was clear, yet agonizingly difficult. Run and preserve their immediate safety, or stay and risk everything for a justice that might never come, but could change their future forever. What would you do in Helena's shoes? Would you take the money and disappear, or would you risk it all to expose the truth? Helena wrestled with Ricardo's veiled threat, the chilling implication of his words echoing in the oppressive silence of the abandoned farm. Her mind, a whirlwind of terror and righteous fury, searched desperately for a path forward, a flicker of hope in the overwhelming darkness. The innocent faces of her children, Sophia and Lucas, were her anchors, her reason to fight, yet also her most profound vulnerability. As the first star pricked the darkening sky, a figure emerged from the deep shadows of the ancient oak at the far edge of the property, a gnarled, almost mystical presence. Donna Margarida, an elderly woman with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries, moved with a slow, deliberate grace, her tattered shawl fluttering like a moth's wing in the gathering dusk. She was a fixture of the land, an informal guardian of its deepest memories, living in a humble shack nestled on the farm's forgotten border, a place few ever noticed. Her skin, like aged parchment, was a map of countless suns and seasons, and her hands, though wrinkled, possessed a strength that spoke of a life intertwined with the earth's harsh realities and gentle rhythms. Helena had only vaguely noticed her before, a fleeting glimpse of an ancient soul tending to a small, impossibly green garden where dry earth should have been. Now, her presence felt like a deliberate act. A shift in the very air around Serra Negra, carrying a faint scent of herbs and wood smoke, a stark contrast to the decay within the main house, an intrusion of life into a place suffocating under the weight of death and long-forgotten secrets. It was a beacon in Helena's rapidly deepening despair, a shadow moving towards her with purpose. Donna Margarida approached Helena with an unhurried pace, her bare feet silent on the dusty ground, her gaze fixed and unwavering. There was no fear in her ancient eyes, only a profound sense of understanding, as if she had witnessed this exact scene play out countless times across the vast tapestry of history. The air, already thick with the weight of Helena's anxiety, seemed to shimmer with an unspoken connection between the two women. Helena felt an instinctive pull towards the old woman, a desperate hope blooming within her that perhaps, just perhaps, this solitary figure held a key to the bewildering complexity of Serra Negra. The faint scent of chamomile and something wild, untamed, emanated from Margarida, a soothing counterpoint to the metallic tang of fear that coated Helena's tongue. The elderly woman stopped a few feet away, her eyes dark and deep like old riverstones, scanning Helena's face with a knowing intensity that stripped away all pretense. It was as if Margarida could see not just Helena's current predicament, but also the weight of her past sorrows and the flickering spark of defiance in her weary soul. A faint, almost imperceptible nod passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of shared burdens and unspoken truths. "He's here." Donna Margarida's voice was a low, resonant rumble, like stones shifting in a dry riverbed, carrying the cadence of the land itself. Her words were not a question, but a statement of undeniable fact, confirming Helena's deepest fears. "Ricardo, he circles like a vulture, always has, but this time he senses a kill, a scent of something he craves more than blood." Her gaze drifted towards the barn, then back to Helena, a silent understanding passing between them, a recognition of the secret Helena now carried. The subtle gesture, the knowing look, confirmed what Helena had only suspected. Margarida was aware of the treasure, the diaries, the entire buried history. A shiver, not of cold but of revelation, traced its way down Helena's spine. It was a terrifying realization, yet also a strangely comforting one, to know that she was not entirely alone in this treacherous labyrinth. The weight of her secret, which had been pressing down on her like a tombstone, suddenly felt a little lighter, shared now with this unexpected, ancient confidant. Donna Margarida explained, her voice gaining a quiet urgency, that Ricardo's arrival was no coincidence, nor was it a mere act of administration. His thugs have been circling like hungry dogs for days, sniffing around the edges of the property, their presence a palpable menace in the usually quiet countryside. She described seeing them, lurking near the old boundaries, their dark vehicles leaving telltale tracks on the soft earth, their eyes constantly scanning, searching for something. "They are his eyes and ears," she stated, her voice laced with a deep, historical resentment. "He's impatient, restless. His grandfather, that snake Almeida, spoke of the treasure, the papers, on his deathbed, a deathbed confession that poisoned the family for generations. Ricardo craves what was always hidden from him, the final piece of his stolen legacy." The reality of the situation solidified for Helena. Ricardo wasn't just guessing, he knew something was here, his greed fueled by a family curse and a desperate need to complete his illicit inheritance. The ground beneath Helena's feet suddenly felt less like solid earth and more like shifting sand, ready to swallow her whole. "My grandfather," Donna Margarida continued, her voice now a low, mournful whisper, "was one of them. Not by choice, not like the Colonel or Almeida. He was a small farmer, like many caught in their web. His lands were taken, his spirit broken. But he was clever, and he saw the deceit. He kept copies hidden away just in case. Proof. He called them the whispers of the wronged. He never lived to see justice, but he believed someone, someday, would find them. Someone brave enough, desperate enough to understand their power. She reached into the folds of her worn shawl, her movements slow and deliberate, and produced a small, oilskin-wrapped bundle, the faint smell of aged paper and something metallic, like ancient ink, wafted towards Helena. It was a tangible link to a past Helena was only just beginning to uncover, a thread connecting her own despair to generations of injustice. The quiet rustle of the oilskin was louder than any shout, a testament to the weight of the history it contained, a silent cry across decades. Unwrapping the bundle, Donna Margarida revealed a collection of faded maps, their lines meticulously drawn, marking boundaries that no longer officially existed, alongside brittle, handwritten land titles, some bearing crests and stamps that spoke of their undeniable authenticity. These were the original deeds, the true ownership documents, painstakingly copied and preserved by her grandfather, a silent act of defiance against the overwhelming power of Colonel Medeiros and Dr. Almeida. They predated the fraudulent documents, their existence a direct challenge to the current ownership of Serra Negra and the vast surrounding lands that now belong to Ricardo. This, Margarida said, her voice firm, her eyes piercing, this is the true treasure, not the gold, for gold poisons the heart. This is justice. This is the voice of the silenced. Helena felt the rough edges of the old paper beneath her fingertips, a conduit to the forgotten lives, the stolen dreams, the centuries of silent suffering woven into the very soil of Serra Negra. The weight of these documents in her hand felt immense, far heavier than any gold bar, burning with the heat of a dormant, ancient truth. The Colonel's gold, his diaries. Margarida gestured vaguely towards the barn, a knowing look in her eyes. They tell the story of the crime. But these, she tapped the documents in Helena's hand, these are the absolute, undeniable proof of the lie. They are the keys to unlocking generations of stolen peace, of rightful legacy denied. They are the voices of the true owners, crying out from the earth. You were meant to find them, Helena, just as I was meant to keep these safe until the right heart, the right hand, arrived. Helena felt a profound sense of destiny settle upon her, a chilling realization that her desperate flight to Serra Negra was not merely an accident, but a preordained step in a much larger, more intricate dance of fate and justice. The air around them seemed to thicken with the echoes of ancestral whispers, the hopes and prayers of generations of wronged families finally finding their champion in a widowed seamstress. A sacred trust had been passed, a burden and a blessing intertwined. Donna Margarida looked towards the main house, her expression hardening, a flicker of ancient anger in her eyes. But time is short, child. Ricardo will not wait. He senses what you have found. His greed is a disease, and it has festered for too long. He will come, and he will take with violence if necessary. His thugs, those hungry dogs, they are already on the prowl, their shadows stretching long across the fields. They care nothing for the land, only for what they can extract from it. He will try to scare you, to break you, but you are stronger than he knows, stronger than even you believe. Her words, though a stark warning, were also an implicit vote of confidence, a recognition of Helena's inner resilience that Helena herself had long forgotten. The ground beneath their feet seemed to hum with a restless energy, the silent tension building, a drumbeat of impending confrontation. Suddenly, a distant sound, sharper and more defined than the rustling leaves, pierced the stillness of the night. A low growl of powerful engines, closer this time. Approaching the main dirt road, it was not the familiar drone of a single vehicle, but the synchronized thrum of several, moving with a calculated, predatory intent. Helena's heart leaped into her throat, a cold wave of terror washing over her, erasing any last vestiges of the fleeting hope that Margarida's presence had ignited. Ricardo had returned, and he had brought his pack. The air crackled with an ominous energy, the very trees seeming to hold their breath. The silence of the remote countryside, once comforting in its vastness, now felt like a suffocating shroud, amplifying the approaching threat. The scent of fear, sharp and metallic, filled Helena's nostrils, mingling with the earthy aroma of the old woman's shawl. "They're here," Margarita whispered, her voice low and grave, her ancient eyes narrowed, peering into the shadows that now danced under the moon. "He's lost patience. He knows." Her hand, surprisingly firm, grasped Helena's arm, pulling her towards the dense undergrowth at the edge of the farm, away from the looming silhouette of the main house. "We must go, and quickly. There is a path, known only to a few, that leads to an old hunting cabin deep in the woods. It is a place of safety, a place where a friend awaits. But you must take everything. The gold, the diaries, and these. They are your shield, your weapon, your future." Her words were punctuated by the increasing roar of the approaching vehicles, the crunch of heavy tires on the gravel becoming louder, closer, the sound of an invasion. Helena's breath hitched in her throat, a silent scream of panic, vying with the fierce urge to protect her children. The beam of powerful headlights swept across the main facade of Serra Negra, momentarily illuminating the derelict structure before settling on the driveway, casting long, menacing shadows. 3 black SUVs, larger and more imposing than Ricardo's earlier vehicle, came to a screeching halt, their engines cutting out abruptly, plunging the night into a sudden, unnerving silence. Then, car doors slammed open, the metallic thuds echoing like gunshots in the quiet air. Dark figures, large and menacing, spilled out, their heavy boots crunching on the gravel. Helena, hidden with Margarita in the dense thicket, felt her heart hammer against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She could feel the vibrations of their heavy footsteps through the soles of her worn boots, a primal warning of danger. The air filled with a tense, oppressive quiet, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl, a mournful lament for the peace that was about to be shattered. A figure emerged from the central SUV, his silhouette unmistakable even in the low light. Dr. Ricardo Almeida, no longer affecting his smooth and practiced smile, now carried an aura of cold, calculating fury. His jaw was set, his movements sharp and decisive. He looked directly at the main house, his gaze piercing the darkness, as if he could already see the hidden treasure within. Helena felt a cold dread seep into her bones. He was here, and he meant business. His eyes were not just searching for objects, they were searching for her, for the one who dared to disturb his family's long-buried secret. The air around him seemed to crackle, with an impatient menace, his refined exterior now barely concealing the ruthless ambition that drove him. He was a predator, now fully unleashed, and Helena, with her children, were his unsuspecting prey. Ricardo barked orders, his voice carrying clearly in the night, devoid of the earlier civility. "Search everything, every room, every crack, every hidden corner." She found something. "I know it. Find the chest, find the papers, and if you find her, bring her to me, unharmed, but make sure she understands the consequences of her foolishness." His tone left no room for doubt. His patience had completely evaporated. The thugs, a group of burly men with hardened faces and menacing gaits, fanned out, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, their heavy boots thudding on the sagging floorboards of the main house, then moving towards the other outbuildings. The sounds of splintering wood, crashing furniture and tearing fabric soon followed, a symphony of destruction that tore at Helena's fragile composure. Her heart ached for the little they had, now being desecrated by these ruthless invaders. Helena instinctively covered Lucas's mouth, pulling Sophia closer, as a sob threatened to escape her lips. The sounds of destruction from the house were terrifying. Each crash and splintering sound a direct assault on her desperate attempt to create a safe space for her children. "We must get to the barn," Margarita whispered, her voice a low imperative, pulling Helena gently by the arm. "That's where it is, and that's where they will eventually look. We must retrieve it before they do. Follow me, quietly. Do not make a sound." Helena could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, a cold, sharp current that brought an unnatural clarity to her mind. Her feet, usually heavy with exhaustion, now moved with a silent, almost desperate agility, propelled by a primal urge to protect her children and the fragile hope these documents represented. The dark forms of the thugs moving through the house, Their flashlights dancing like malevolent fireflies were a chilling backdrop to their desperate escape attempt. They moved like ghosts through the moonlit shadows, Margarita leading the way, her ancient knowledge of the land guiding them through overgrown paths and forgotten corners. The sounds of breaking glass and splintering wood from the main house were a constant, terrifying reminder of the danger they were fleeing, the tangible proof of Ricardo's ruthless intent. They reached the barn, its massive wooden doors now hanging more precariously than ever, and slipped inside, the air thick with the smell of old hay and dry earth. Helena's eyes immediately went to the pile of hay in the corner, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She could already hear the shouts of the thugs, their heavy footsteps approaching, their flashlights sweeping through the other side of the barn. There was no time to lose. This was it, the moment of reckoning. With a desperate urgency that defied her physical exhaustion, Helena scrambled to the pile of hay, her hands tearing at the prickly bales, desperate to uncover the trapdoor. Lucas, despite his terror, clung to her side, his small hands helping to pull away the lighter bits of hay, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. Sophia, usually timid, watched with a quiet intensity, her small fists clenched, her body trembling. Margarita stood guard at the entrance, her silhouette framed against the moonlight, her figure radiating an ancient, unwavering resolve. She was a sentinel against the encroaching darkness, her presence a silent promise of protection. The shouts grew louder, closer, the distinct clank of heavy boots on the barn's wooden floorboards, now undeniable, each sound a hammer blow against Helena's racing heart. Just as Helena's fingers found the rusty iron ring of the trapdoor, a blinding flashlight beam cut through the darkness of the barn, illuminating their huddled forms. A gruff voice roared, "There! In the corner! They're in the barn!" Helena froze, her heart seizing in her chest, the blood rushing from her face. Fear, cold and absolute, threatened to paralyze her. But then she heard Lucas whimper, and the sight of Sophia's terrified face spurred her into action. A surge of adrenaline overriding the paralysis. She yanked at the ring, the trapdoor groaning in protest as she pulled it open, revealing the dark abyss of the cellar below. There was no time for caution, no time for hesitation. This was pure instinct, raw survival. Go down, quickly!" Margarita's voice, surprisingly strong, cut through the clamor as she positioned herself squarely in front of the trapdoor, her frail body a defiant barrier against the approaching thugs. "Take the children. Take everything. I will hold them off." Helena hesitated for a split second, her eyes meeting Margarita's, seeing a fierce, unwavering determination that echoed the strength of the ancient land itself. It was a silent, desperate sacrifice, a moment of profound courage. Tears welled in Helena's eyes, but she swallowed them back, knowing that this was not the time for sentiment. This was the time for action, for survival. "Mama, quick!" Lucas urged, his small voice surprisingly clear as he tugged at her hand, already starting down the ladder into the darkness. Helena, grabbing Sophia, practically pushed her down, then followed, her body aching, her mind a blur of motion and terror. She could hear the shouts of the thugs, now right outside the barn, their voices angry, frustrated. The faint thud of a body hitting the floor, then a struggle, reached her ears, a chilling testament to Margarita's courage and sacrifice. The stench of fear, her own fear, was overwhelming, mingling with the musty aroma of the cellar. This descent was not just into darkness, but into a desperate gamble for their very lives, a flight from a ruthless, unyielding enemy. As Helena reached the bottom of the ladder, she quickly fumbled for the chest, its brass latches gleaming faintly in the sliver of moonlight filtering through the trapdoor above. Her hands, surprisingly steady despite her terror, quickly closed around the gold bars, the diaries, and the precious documents, bundling them into the canvas bag she had prepared earlier. Every rustle of the old papers, every clink of the gold, seemed deafeningly loud in the oppressive silence of the cellar, each sound a terrifying betrayal of their hiding place. The weight of the treasure, once a symbol of immense wealth, now felt like a desperate anchor, a burden she had to carry to ensure their survival, to secure their future. She could hear the shouts above, the muffled thuds, and a primal scream of rage from Ricardo, his frustration mounting as their escape became apparent. "They're coming down," Margarita's voice, strained but resolute, echoed from above, followed by the heavy thud of footsteps on the ladder, shaking the very foundations of the cellar. "There's a secret passage behind the far wall. Push the loose stone. Go, don't look back." Helena's eyes darted to the rough-hewn stone wall, her gaze frantically searching for a loose stone, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her fingers, scraped and raw, scrambled across the cold, damp rock, desperately seeking the hidden mechanism, the last hope of escape. The sound of heavy breathing of grunting thugs was now chillingly close, descending the ladder into the confined space, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating the panic in her children's eyes. This was it, the final desperate dash for freedom. With a final desperate shove, Helena found the loose stone. It grated against the others, then gave way with a soft click, revealing a narrow, almost invisible opening in the wall, shrouded in deeper darkness. It smelled of damp earth and ancient secrets, a path forgotten by time. "Children, quickly," she urged, pushing Sophia and Lucas through the narrow opening, their small bodies barely fitting. She grabbed the heavy canvas bag, the weight of the golden documents almost pulling her back, but the image of Ricardo's furious face, now visible at the top of the ladder, spurred her onward. The glint of a gun in one of the thugs' hands made her stomach clench with an icy fear, a stark reminder of the ultimate price they might pay for these secrets. As Helena squeezed through the narrow passage, the last sounds she heard were Ricardo's enraged roar. "She has it! Don't let them escape!" followed by the frantic shouts of his men, and then a profound, unsettling silence as the loose stone somehow, miraculously, slid back into place, sealing their escape and plunging them into absolute darkness. The air in the passage was thick with the scent of damp earth and the lingering fear, but also with a faint, hopeful trace of fresh air from somewhere far ahead. They were in a tunnel, a secret passage known only to Margarita and the spirits of the land, a final desperate path to safety. Helena felt the cold, hard walls of the tunnel against her, her hands guiding her children forward, one foot in front of the other, into the unknown. The passage was long and winding, the darkness absolute, pressing in on them like a heavy blanket. Helena stumbled forward, her senses heightened, her ears straining for any sound other than the hurried breathing of her children and the rhythmic thump of her own terrified heart. The scent of damp earth and decaying roots filled her nostrils, a constant reminder of their subterranean journey. Her hands, outstretched, brushed against rough-hewn rock and clinging cobwebs, but each step forward was a step away from Ricardo's grasp, a step towards a fragile, uncertain freedom. Lucas, surprisingly brave, held her hand tightly, his small fingers a comforting anchor in the terrifying dark. Sophia, usually more prone to tears, moved with a quiet, resolute determination, a testament to the raw courage born of fear and necessity. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only minutes, a faint glimmer of light appeared at the end of the tunnel, a tiny pinprick of hope in the overwhelming darkness. The air began to grow fresher, carrying the crisp, cool scent of pine and damp foliage. Relief, so potent it threatened to buckle her knees, washed over Helena. They had made it. They had escaped the suffocating grip of Serra Negra, carrying not only the gold and the diaries, but also the invaluable original land documents, a legacy of injustice and a promise of future redemption. The weight of the canvas bag, which had seemed so oppressive moments before, now felt like a shield, a tangible symbol of their desperate fight for justice. They emerged into the cool night air, not far from the perimeter of the farm, but deep within a thick, ancient forest, the kind that swallows sound and light. The air, crisp and clean, smelled of pine needles and damp earth, a welcome contrast to the stale, fear-laden air of the cellar. Helena pulled Sophia and Lucas close, burying her face in their hair, the sheer relief momentarily overwhelming her. They were safe, for now. Just a few steps from the mouth of the tunnel, a small, weathered hunting cabin stood nestled among the trees, its chimney sending a faint wisp of smoke into the night sky. Margarita had mentioned a friend, a contact. This must be the place. The cabin, humble and rustic, exuded a warmth that reached out to them like a comforting embrace. The faint glow of a lantern within and the gentle aroma of wood smoke were a balm to Helena's frayed nerves. As they approached, the cabin door creaked open, revealing the silhouette of a tall, kind-faced man, his eyes, though obscured by shadow, radiating a quiet welcome. He had been expecting them. Margarita's foresight, her intricate web of connections across the land, had provided them with a sanctuary, a temporary reprieve from the relentless pursuit. Helena's legs, weary and trembling, carried her forward, each step a testament to the brutal journey they had just endured, but also a step towards an unknown, yet hopeful, future. The man, whose face was etched with a quiet kindness, introduced himself as João, a distant relative of Margarita's and a staunch defender of land rights. He led them inside the small cabin, where a crackling fire in the stone hearth cast flickering shadows on the wooden walls, chasing away the chill and the oppressive darkness. The aroma of strong coffee and simmering stew filled the air, a scent so comforting, so utterly unlike the stench of decay and fear that had permeated their lives, that Helena felt a fresh wave of emotion wash over her. Her stomach, which had been a tight knot of anxiety for days, now rumbled faintly, a forgotten sensation. She slumped onto a rough-hewn bench, the canvas bag containing their precious cargo still clutched tightly in her lap, the weight of it a constant, tangible reminder of their ordeal. João, without asking questions, offered them warm blankets and mugs of hot, sweet tea, his movements calm and reassuring. He looked at Helena, his gaze sympathetic, his silence a profound understanding of the terror and exhaustion she had endured. He then looked at the canvas bag in her lap, his eyes lingering for a moment, a knowing glint, acknowledging the immense burden and powerful truth it held. Margarita called, he said, his voice soft. She told me everything. You are safe here for now. No one will find you. And these, he gestured towards the bag, these are powerful. They will bring justice, eventually. But first, you must rest, for the children's sake, and for yours. His words were a soothing balm, an invitation to a momentary surrender from the relentless pressure. Helena finally allowed herself to breathe, a deep, shuddering breath that emptied her lungs of the stale air of fear and replaced it with the clean, warm air of safety. The fire crackled, casting a golden glow on Sophia and Lucas, who were already curled up on a makeshift bed by the hearth, their faces soft and peaceful in sleep, their small bodies finally relaxed. Helena felt a hot tear escape, tracing a path down her dust-streaked cheek, not of sadness, but of overwhelming gratitude and relief. She had done it. She had saved her children, and she had protected the secrets that could bring justice to so many. The events of the night replayed in her mind, a dizzying montage of terror and courage. The image of Margarita's defiant stance forever burned into her memory, a silent promise of her own resilience. The weight of the canvas bag still felt immense in her lap, but now it was a weight of purpose, not just burden. Inside lay the gold, the colonel's diaries, and the original, irrefutable land documents, a trove of evidence that spanned nearly a century, weaving a tangled narrative of greed, betrayal, and unyielding human spirit. This was not merely about her own survival anymore. It was about honoring the sacrifices of generations, about righting a monumental wrong that had festered in the very earth of Serra Negra. The warm fire, the scent of wood smoke, the quiet presence of João, and the soft, even breathing of her sleeping children, all combined to create a sense of peace she hadn't felt in what seemed like a lifetime. It was a fragile peace, bought with courage and sacrifice, but it was peace nonetheless, a moment of respite before the inevitable fight for justice. The night outside was still, the vast forest a silent witness to their ordeal, its ancient trees whispering secrets to the stars. Helena knew the fight was far from over. Ricardo, a man driven by unbridled greed and a sense of entitled legacy, would not simply give up. His fury would be immense, his resources vast. But now, Helena was no longer alone, nor was she unarmed. She had the truth, the evidence, and an unexpected ally in João, a man who understood the intricate dance of power and justice in these remote lands. She clutched the canvas bag tighter, the hard edges of the gold bars and the brittle paper of the documents pressing into her palms. This was more than just to escape. It was the beginning of a relentless pursuit of justice, a battle for the very soul of Serra Negra, a battle she was now determined to win. As the first faint streaks of dawn began to paint the eastern sky, Helena sat by the dying embers of the fire, her eyes heavy but clear. She had not slept, her mind too active, too many thoughts swirling in the quiet stillness of the cabin. She looked at Lucas and Sophia, still deeply asleep, their faces peaceful, their small bodies finally relaxed. A fierce, protective love surged through her, hardening her resolve. She thought of Donna Margarita, her unwavering courage, her ultimate sacrifice to buy them time. The old woman's words echoed in her mind. You were meant to find them. This is justice. Helena knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that she could not, would not, fail. The long night of terror had forged a new strength within her, an unyielding determination to confront the darkness she had uncovered, to bring light to the buried truths of Serra Negra. The weight of the documents, the diaries, and the gold in the canvas bag next to her was no longer a burden, but a shield, a weapon forged from injustice itself. She traced the rough texture of the old parchment with her fingertips, feeling the history contained within, the silent cries of generations of wronged families. She was no longer just Helena, the grieving widow, the desperate seamstress. She was now a guardian of truth, a reluctant warrior in a battle for justice, propelled by the raw courage of a mother protecting her children and the fierce loyalty to a promise made to a brave old woman. The quiet hum of the forest outside seemed to resonate with her new purpose, a silent cheer for the fight that was about to begin, a fight that would reshape not only her own destiny, but the very fabric of Serra Negra. Helena spent the daylight hours meticulously organizing the documents, the colonel's diaries, and the gold, laying them out on the small wooden table in the cabin. The soft sunlight filtering through the window illuminated the faded ink, the intricate details of the maps, and the dull gleam of the gold bars. Each piece, when placed together, formed a damning mosaic of corruption and theft, a meticulously documented history of a crime that had remained unpunished for generations. João sat silently beside her, offering an occasional word of clarification, his deep knowledge of local history filling in the missing gaps, giving names and faces to the victims mentioned so vaguely in the diaries. His presence was a comforting anchor in the stormy sea of information, a reassuring hand guiding her through the intricate web of deceit. The story unfolded before her, not just as a historical narrative, but as a living, breathing injustice that still echoed through the land. João explained how the families, dispossessed and scattered, had carried the trauma for decades, their stories becoming whispers passed down through generations, yet never finding a voice strong enough to challenge the powerful Almeida family. Helena felt a profound sense of responsibility, a solemn vow forming in her heart to be that voice, to finally break the silence. The sheer audacity of the fraud, the cold-blooded calculation of it all, burned within her, igniting a quiet fury that solidified her resolve. The gold, once a symbol of immense wealth, now felt like a curse, a tangible reminder of the suffering it had caused, a debt that needed to be repaid, not just in money but in justice. João's eyes, filled with a deep ancestral sadness, rested on the faded maps. My own family, he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. They lost everything. Our lands, our identity, all swallowed by the colonel's hunger, then by Almeida's silence. We knew, always knew, but had no proof, no one to listen, until now. His words added another layer of urgency to Helena's mission, transforming it from a personal quest for survival into a collective fight for historical redress. She saw not just her own desperation reflected in his gaze, but the pain of countless families, their land, their livelihoods, their very histories erased by the stroke of a corrupt pen and the glint of ill-gotten gold. The silence in the cabin was broken only by the crackle of the fire, a solemn backdrop to the weight of their shared purpose. The next few days in the cabin were a blur of meticulous planning and quiet strategizing. Helena, guided by João's wisdom and his deep understanding of the region's power dynamics, began to formulate a plan. Her mind, once consumed by the immediate need for survival, now worked with a new, sharp focus, analyzing the documents, cross-referencing names, building a compelling case. She learned about the intricate web of influence the Almeida family still wielded, their deep roots in local politics and agribusiness, their ability to silence dissent and twist legal processes to their advantage. The scale of the challenge was immense, almost overwhelming, but the evidence she held, combined with Joan's unwavering support, provided a nascent sense of possibility, a faint light at the end of a very long, dark tunnel. Joan revealed that he had already made contact with a federal prosecutor, a man known for his unyielding commitment to land rights and human rights, a rare beacon of integrity in a system often swayed by power and wealth. "He is far from here, in the capital," Joan explained, his voice low, "but he listens. He has fought against powerful men before. He will understand the significance of what you have found." The thought of a federal prosecutor, an authority figure who might actually champion their cause, sent a surge of hope through Helena. A desperate, almost forgotten sensation. It was a tangible step towards justice, a powerful ally in their fight against a seemingly insurmountable adversary. The seeds of redemption planted in despair were beginning to take root, fragile but resilient. Joan's words painted a clear picture of the prosecutor's dedication, his reputation for fearlessly pursuing cases of historical injustice, often at great personal risk. He had successfully brought down powerful figures before dismantling networks of corruption that had seemed untouchable. "He is a man of honor," Joan stated, his voice firm, a rarity in these times. "He will see the truth in these papers, and he will act, but we must be careful. Ricardo's reach is long, his methods ruthless. Secrecy is our greatest weapon until we are ready to strike." The gravity of their situation intensified, transforming their simple escape into a covert operation, a clandestine movement against a powerful, entrenched enemy. Helena knew that every move from this point forward had to be calculated, every step precise, for their lives, and the fate of generations depended on it. Helena felt a profound sense of responsibility, a solemn weight settling upon her shoulders. She was not just fighting for her children's future, but for the countless others whose stories were woven into the fabric of these ancient documents. The cold reality of the risk was ever present. Ricardo's ruthless threats, the constant danger to her children. Yet, a new kind of courage had taken root within her, a quiet, unyielding strength born from a deep sense of purpose. She meticulously reread sections of the colonel's diaries, tracing the faded words with her fingertip, absorbing the grim details of his scheme, determined to understand every nuance of the injustice they were about to expose. The quiet cabin had become her war room, her sanctuary where she prepared for the battle ahead, fueled by a fierce, protective love and a burgeoning sense of justice. The sound of an approaching vehicle, muffled by the dense forest but distinct in the quiet evening, jolted Helena from her contemplation. Her heart lurched, a cold wave of fear washing over her. Had Ricardo found them already? Had their brief respite been tragically cut short? Joan, his hand already on the rifle leaning against the wall, looked at her, his face grim. The children, roused by the sudden shift in atmosphere, stirred from their sleep, their small faces etched with nascent fear. The cabin, which had felt like a haven, now seemed fragile, vulnerable. The silence of the forest outside felt suddenly menacing, pregnant with unseen danger. Every rustle of leaves, every distant snap of a twig seemed amplified, a potential harbinger of renewed terror. "Stay here with the children," Joan ordered, his voice low but firm, as he moved towards the small barred window, peering cautiously into the encroaching twilight. "I'll check. It might be nothing, but we cannot risk it." Helena held Sophia and Lucas tightly, her body tensing, her eyes fixed on Joan, her breath held captive in her throat. The canvas bag, containing the powerful evidence lay forgotten on the table, its purpose momentarily overshadowed by the immediate, visceral threat to her children. The air in the cabin grew thick with unspoken dread, the warmth of the fire suddenly feeling inadequate against the chilling possibility of discovery and confrontation. The thin wooden walls seemed to offer little protection against the menacing sounds outside. Joan returned from the window, his face a mixture of relief and cautious concern. "It's not Ricardo's men," he said, exhaling slowly, "but it's a vehicle headed deep into the woods, beyond even this trail. They're searching. Ricardo will not rest. He has sent patrols into the farthest reaches of his territory, a dragnet for you and what you carry. This cabin, this haven, will not be secret for much longer. We must act soon, Helena." before he closes every path, every possibility. His words, though not an immediate threat, carried a grave urgency, a clear warning that their window of opportunity was rapidly shrinking. The brief respite had served its purpose, but now the time for quiet planning was over. The time for decisive action was upon them. Helena nodded, her jaw set, her eyes hardening with renewed determination. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now tempered by an unyielding resolve. "Then we contact the prosecutor," she stated, her voice surprisingly steady. "Now, tonight, the sooner he has the evidence, the sooner this nightmare can end, for everyone." She looked at João, a silent plea for his continued guidance and support. He met her gaze, a profound understanding passing between them, a shared commitment to justice. The sounds of the distant vehicle continued, a constant, low thrum in the background, a relentless reminder of the danger lurking just beyond their small Sekisin flickering circle of light and temporary safety. The decision made, João immediately began preparing. He took out a satellite phone, its sleek, modern design, a stark contrast to the rustic surroundings, and explained its operation to Helena. "It's our only way to reach him from here without being traced," he murmured, his fingers deftly punching in a long series of numbers. Helena watched, her heart pounding with a mixture of apprehension and surging hope. This small device, connecting them to the outside world, to a force of justice, felt like a lifeline thrown into a raging storm. The gravity of the moment was palpable, each dial tone, each ring, a step closer to confronting the powerful forces that had so long oppressed the land and its people. This was the point of no return, the moment where their silent fight would finally become a loud, undeniable roar. As João spoke into the phone, his voice low and urgent, Helena held Lucas and Sophia close, their small bodies a source of both vulnerability and immense strength. She could hear fragmented words from João's side of the conversation. Margarida, documents, gold, Almeida, evidence. Each word was a tiny seed of hope, carefully planted in the fertile ground of her desperation. The silence in the cabin was broken only by João's hushed tones and the crackle of the satellite connection, an ethereal bridge between their isolated sanctuary and the far-off halls of justice. The weight of centuries of injustice, of stolen land and broken lives, now hung in the balance, waiting for the right ears to listen, the right heart to champion their cause. The conversation with the federal prosecutor was long and detailed, João meticulously relaying the grim narrative, Helena interjecting with crucial details about her discovery, about Ricardo's threats. The prosecutor, even over the crackling line, conveyed a sense of grave professionalism and unwavering commitment. He listened intently, his voice calm, making notes, his questions precise and incisive, peeling back layers of deceit and historical neglect. Helena felt a surge of validation. Her story, her evidence, was being taken seriously. The sense of isolation, of being a lone voice against an overwhelming power, slowly began to recede, replaced by the profound realization that they were now part of a much larger movement, a powerful force for change. The darkness that had clung to Serra Negra for so long began to recede, just a fraction, allowing a glimmer of light to penetrate. The prosecutor's instructions were clear. Stay hidden. Remain vigilant. Do not engage with Ricardo or his men under any circumstances. He assured them that a team, composed of federal agents and investigators, would be mobilized immediately. Their journey long and clandestine, but their arrival imminent. He stressed the importance of protecting the evidence, ensuring its integrity, for it was the cornerstone of their entire case. Helena, listening to his firm, authoritative voice, felt a sense of calm wash over her, a quiet confidence she hadn't known she possessed. The vast indifferent ocean that had once threatened to swallow her whole now seemed to part, revealing a path forward, a clear direction towards the distant shores of justice. The enormity of the task ahead was still daunting, but for the first time she truly believed it was possible. As João ended the call, a palpable sense of relief settled over the small cabin. The air, which had been thick with tension, now felt lighter, charged with a newfound purpose. Helena looked at the canvas bag, at the gold and the documents within, no longer as a burden of past crimes, but as a beacon of future justice. She thought of Donna Margarida, her unwavering courage, her ultimate sacrifice. Her sacrifice would not be in vain. The wheels of justice, though slow, were now in motion, set in motion by a desperate widow, an ancient ally, and the forgotten whispers of the wronged. The night, still dark outside, no longer felt oppressive, but held the promise of a coming dawn, a dawn of redemption and truth that would finally break over Serra Negra. The satellite phone call, a fragile thread connecting their isolated cabin to the relentless machinery of justice, concluded with a profound sense of shift. João, his face etched with a quiet triumph, confirmed the prosecutor's immediate commitment. No longer were they merely fugitives, they were instruments of justice, holding the undeniable truth. The federal prosecutor, a man whose reputation for integrity preceded him, understood the gravity of the evidence. The gold, the detailed diaries, and the original land documents, all testifying to a century of systemic fraud. Helena felt a surge of cold determination replace the lingering fear. The time for hiding was over. The time for decisive action had arrived. A sense of righteous purpose solidified within her, a new strength born from the depths of her despair and Margarida's ultimate sacrifice. Within days, the remote corners of Serra Negra saw an unusual flurry of activity. Not Ricardo's thugs, but sleek, unmarked vehicles belonging to the federal police, their presence discreet yet authoritative. The prosecutor himself, a stern but compassionate figure, arrived with a team of investigators. João, acting as their guide and trusted witness, led them through the hidden passage to the cellar, where the treasure lay untouched, awaiting its moment in the light. The sight of the gold and the ancient documents, verified against the colonel's detailed journals, solidified their case. Every faded word, every intricate map, every gleaming bar of gold became a silent, irrefutable witness to the colossal injustice. The weight of history was now palpably present, demanding redress. Dr. Ricardo Almeida, arrogant and confident, was still scouring the dilapidated farm with his men, convinced Helena and her children had merely fled in terror, leaving his prize behind. He expected to reclaim his family's ill-gotten gains with brute force. His smug satisfaction, however, was shattered by the sudden, decisive arrival of federal police cruisers, their sirens cutting through the morning stillness like a surgeon's scalpel. He watched in disbelief as officers armed and unyielding surrounded his men, demanding their surrender. His carefully constructed facade of control crumbled, replaced by a raw, naked fury, as he realized his dominion over Serra Negra had come to an abrupt, irrevocable end. The hunter had become the hunted. Ricardo's eyes, wide with shock and incandescent rage, followed the prosecutor as he emerged from the barn, holding aloft the thick, leather-bound diaries and the original land deeds. The sight of the undeniable evidence, coupled with the glint of the gold bars displayed by a federal agent, drained all color from Ricardo's face. His grandfather's secret, the very foundation of his inherited empire, was exposed. He roared in protest, attempting to rally his bewildered men, but it was useless. The prosecutor, with a calm authority that silenced Ricardo's bluster, read his rights. The cold click of handcuffs echoed across the desolate farm, a stark punctuation mark to generations of deceit. Dr. Ricardo Almeida, once untouchable, was led away, his power dissolved into dust. The arrest of Ricardo was merely the tip of a much larger iceberg. The evidence Helena had so bravely preserved triggered a vast federal investigation, unraveling a complex network of corruption that had thrived for decades. Ricardo's assets, including Serra Negra and vast tracts of illegally acquired land, were systematically confiscated by the state. The illicit fortune, documented so meticulously in the colonel's diaries, was traced and seized, a testament to the power of hidden truth. The entire region, long oppressed by the Almeida family's influence, watched in awe as the foundations of their power crumbled, proving that even the most entrenched injustices could eventually be brought to light. Helena, far from seeking personal enrichment, made a decision that resonated deeply with the spirit of justice she had come to embody. She declared that the confiscated gold, the blood money of generations of suffering, should not be hers alone. Instead, she proposed the creation of a special compensation fund administered by the federal government, specifically for the descendants of the wronged families whose lands were stolen by Colonel Medeiros and his conspirators. Her voice, once fragile and desperate, now carried the weight of moral conviction, transforming the cursed treasure into a powerful instrument of healing and historical redress for a deeply wounded community. In recognition of her courage, her pivotal role in exposing the truth, and her selfless act, Helena was awarded a substantial, fair share of the recovered wealth. It was a sum that promised security, not opulence, enough to finally lay her husband's memory to rest with dignity, to provide a stable, loving home for Lucas and Sophia, and to secure their future with the promise of education and opportunity. This was not just money. It was freedom, peace, and the ability to rebuild a life shattered by loss, now firmly anchored in justice. The financial burden that had once suffocated her was finally lifted, replaced by a profound sense of peace. Serra Negra Farm, once a decaying monument to avarice and despair, began its transformation. Helena, no longer a desperate housekeeper, was appointed its new administrator, dedicating her life to restoring the farm, not to agricultural profit, but to a center for rural culture and memory. The dilapidated main house was meticulously renovated, not to its former grandeur, but as a vibrant community hub, echoing with laughter and learning. It became a place where the history of the land and its people was honored, where workshops in traditional crafts flourished, and where children, including Lucas and Sophia, could grow up understanding the importance of justice, empathy, and the enduring power of truth. Years later, the bitter taste of stale bread and cold car seats was a distant, almost unimaginable memory. Helena watched Sophia, now a bright, confident teenager, helping Lucas, a boisterous and healthy boy, tend a small vegetable garden, their hands in the rich, dark soil of Serra Negra. The warm aroma of a hearty stew, bubbling gently on a clean, modern stove, filled the air of their cozy, fully restored home. The laughter of her children, unburdened by fear or hunger, was the sweetest symphony she had ever heard. Every night, around a table laden with fresh, wholesome food, she recounted stories of resilience, of courage, and of the unwavering spirit of those who fought for what was right. In the quiet evenings, as the last rays of sunlight streamed through the newly installed windows of her sunlit studio, Helena sat at her cherished sewing machine, its rhythmic hum a soothing balm to her soul. She wasn't mending torn clothes out of necessity, but creating beautiful garments, each stitch a testament to a life not just rebuilt, but transformed. Her hands, once clenched in despair, now moved with purposeful grace, crafting joy. Her journey from the brink of destitution to a beacon of justice is a powerful reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can emerge. If Helena's story of resilience and redemption touched your heart, consider subscribing to our channel and sharing this narrative of overcoming with those who need a light in their own darkness.